We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Chesam Beis in Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 48b. The Gemara says, Ahu Gavra Dahavale Bara Dahavishamit Kipe Dechisna. There was an individual who his son, he was stealing these sheaves of flax. So therefore the father prohibited his property upon him, meaning upon the son. He said he's not going to allow his son to benefit from his property because his son was stealing. Amru le, so they said to the father, V'havoi bar barach tzor b'mei rabbanan. But let's say your grandson turns out to be a Talmud Chacham, and somehow you want your property to be inherited in the future by your grandson. So what are you going to do in that situation? How are you going to get your property to your grandson if the property doesn't go through your son first? Amar lahon, so he said to them, Likni hadein, what will happen is as follows. This person, meaning the son, should acquire, V'have bar barit tzor b'mei rabbanan likni, and if my grandson turns out to be a Talmud Chacham, only then will it transfer from the son to the grandson, only then will it really go through the son to my grandson. The Mafarish over here says, Likni hadein di'ihave bar barit tzor b'mei rabbanan, mishum da'akati lo have bar barit ba'olam. The point over here is, the grandson wasn't alive yet. He couldn't just give it directly to the grandson. V'havale mizake l'uber. You can't be mizake something to a fetus. V'hamizake l'uber lo kana. Somebody who's mizake l'uber, it's not a good kinyan. So that's why he said, I'm going to give it to my son only if it really is going to ultimately go to my grandson, who is a Talmud Chacham. And so the Gemara continues, Amri pumbedisoi, they said in Pumbedisa, Kani al menas lahaknosu. In such a situation, what the father is really saying is that the son makes a kinyan only on the condition to give it over, that someone else should acquire it. Really, the son has no actual kinyan. B'chol kani al menas lahaknos lo kani. Anytime you do an acquisition just on the condition to give it over to somebody else, that is not a good kinyan. But Rav Nachman says, Kani, no, it is a good kinyan. Why? Because every time you do a kinyan sudar, that really is a kinyan al manas lahaknos. What the Gemara means to say is that by a kinyan sudar, somebody will give over to the recipient a sudar. He'll give him over a scarf, and the person is going to lift up this scarf, and he's going to be lifting it up in order to acquire something else, not in order to acquire the sudar, the scarf, and therefore you see exactly the same thing. The scarf is being picked up. It's not actually transferring anywhere, but it's causing some other kinyan. So too over here, the son is not actually acquiring anything, but he's causing a kinyan. He's a conduit that it goes to the grandson, and therefore, if Nachman says, just like a kinyan sudar works, so too a kinyan al manas lahaknos will work as well. But the Gemara continues. Amar Rav Ashi says, Uman le malon de sudri tafis le lo mitzvahs. First of all, who says that if the person who is the recipient of the sudar decides to take the sudar for himself, who says he doesn't acquire it? Maybe he does acquire it. In general, by a kinyan sudar, usually the recipient doesn't have any intention to actually acquire the sudar, and he gives it right back. But maybe if he wanted to acquire the sudar, he actually could. So it would not be a proof to our case of kani al manas lahaknos. V'odin further, sudra kani al manas lahaknos v'kani min hashta. By the case of the sudar, it's kani al manas lahaknos, but the kinyan is all happening now. It's all happening at the same moment. But but over here, this property which he's going to be giving to the grandson, when is the kinyan really taking place? It's when the grandson becomes a Talmud Chacham. That's when this whole kinyan goes through. That's already, so to speak, when the sudar has already been returned to the original owner, meaning there's a time delay over here. It happens much later. So therefore, even though the sudar is an effective kinyan, maybe by the case of a kinyan al manas lahaknos, where you're giving it to your son in order that it should go to the grandson sometime in the future when he's a tzor b'mei rabbanan, when he's a Talmud Chacham, maybe that will not be effective. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Nachman. Rava says to Rav Nachman, and remember, Rav Nachman over here is the one that says kinyan al manas lahaknos is going to be effective. So Rava says to Rav Nachman, V'hamatanas beis charon. But what about the case of our Mishnah? Matnas beis charon, where he's giving all of the property of the wedding feast to somebody else in order that the father should participate. The kani al manas lahaknos, that's the case also of kani al manas lahaknos, v'loka kani, and it was not a good acquisition in that case. In other words, we said in that case, since the person said to the recipient, really you have no control, it really is not your property, you're not a true recipient, you're only a conduit so that my father can participate in the feast. So we said, because of that, it's not considered a kinyan, so that should be the same thing as our case, where the son is just acting as a conduit to the grandson, and it should not be a good kinyan. Our Mishnah should be a proof against Rav Nachman, and the kinyan should not be effective. And the Gemara says that Rav Nachman would respond with different answers at different times. Zimnin Amarle, sometimes he would say to him, Misham desudasam uchachas olav. The reason why it didn't work by the matnas beis charon is because the meal proved that his intent was not to give a real gift. So if something happens that proves the person's intention was not a real intention, that's going to be worse. And sometimes he said to him, Rabbi Eliezer, that the Mishnah, by the case of the Manas Beis Charon, they were following the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is the one that says that even if you have small benefits that generally people don't care about, that is also prohibited by a case of Mudr Hano, and that's why by the Matnas Beis Charon, that's at least considered to be a small kind of benefit, and therefore it is going to be prohibited. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Amru Chachamim, the Chachamim said, Kol matana she'eino shemikdisha tehei mekudesh, as any gift, where if the recipient were to be makdish of the gift, it would not be hekdish, eino matana. That is not considered a true gift, and it is not a kinyan. And the Gemara says, Kol le'suye mai. What is the word kol? What does it come to include? Lav la'suye hamilsa d'shadya b'kipe. Isn't the Mishnah saying any gift in this fashion is not a good gift? And it comes to include our case, even a situation, let's say, where you have the son is stealing the sheaves of flax from his father, and now the father wants to give it to his grandson, and he's just using the son as a conduit, that even that kind of kinyan is not going to be effective, and it seems the Mishnah is going against Rav Nachman's psak. Again, Rav Nachman said, a kinyan al manas lahaknos is going to be effective, and the Mishnah seems to be saying with the word kol, that it is not effective. And the Mefarish over here says, Lav la'suya hamilsa d'shadya b'kfela. The Mefarish at first has a different girsa. It's referring to the same thing, but it means the case where there was a double language. Kolomar means to say, Haimaisa shemutel b'tanai kafel. This case where the grandfather employed a double language, to kafel dibure da'amar likni hadain. He had a double language. He said, this one should acquire it. V'have a bar bereit surba me'rabanan likni lebrei. That if the grandson should be a Talmud Chacham, then it's going to go to his son. That in that kind of case, again, devade lo kan. The word kol is coming to include that case and saying it's not a kinyan. V'isdagarsi, some have a different text. This is more like our text. My lav le'suya hamilsa de shamet bekipe isn't including the case of shamet bekipe, again, where he takes the sheaves of flax, meaning to say, again, milsa de beis charon, the dami lo samaisa de kipe de kisna. The case of the beis charon, our Mishnah, it's similar to the case where he's stealing the flax, and we're including all of these cases are not going to be a good kinyan. Again, the same basic idea. And so the Gemara responds, Lo, no, that's not what the word kol is coming to include. Rather, lasuye lishna basra d'shmaite de Rava. It's coming to include the latter version of the teaching of Rava. The Mefarish over here says, Lo, no, lasuye lishna basra d'shmaite de Rava. We're including the latter teaching of the sugya of Rava. Da amar la'el, because Rava said before in that version, afilu amar la, even if he said to him, Vehein lefanecha sheyavo abba v'yochal. Let's say the person gave a gift to another person and said, I'm giving it to you because I want my father to come and participate. He doesn't say it in an absolute fashion, I'm only giving it to you so that my father should come. He's leaving it to the person, but even that to usher, even that is considered usher. That's what the word kol in the Mishnah is saying. Aval heicha damar le liknei hadein dihave barbarate surma merabanan liknei akani amanas lahaknosu. It could be only that case of Rava is not going to be good, but if a person would say that my son should acquire in order that the grandson, if he's a Talmud Chacham, if he should acquire, maybe that actually would be effective. That would be the case of kinyan al manas lahaknos. Maybe the Mishnah is not coming to say that that case is ineffective. Hadron Allah Hashutfin, we will return to you, Perak Hashutfin. This is the conclusion of the 5th Perak of Meseches Nedarim. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Please take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And in the next video, we will continue with Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph in Meseches Nedarim.